Greetings and welcome to another edition of the Astro Weather. It looks like I have the mic on and we are good to go. I like my new mic. Although it's in kind of an awkward position. I wanted something that was more kind of vertical, but I guess this will do, as long as it picks up what I'm saying, right? Am I right about that? Okay. Well, this is the first sort of public time that I um, am going to address the passing of my mother, which happened on Saturday night at about 9:15 p.m. And before I do that, I just want to thank everybody in chat for all of their extremely kind and heartfelt messages. Uh, it means a lot to me, uh, and my mother was the type of person who had a very hard time accepting things like love and gratitude, and she had a very difficult upbringing, and it made it challenging for her to be able to take those things in, right? So I hope that wherever she is, she's feeling what you are sharing and allowing that to come into her, because a lot of times in this lifetime with her body, there was kind of a front line of defense, right? And it wasn't because she didn't appreciate things, because she did. It was just she had a very difficult time um, accepting those things. I think that's the blessing and the curse of the Virgo moon, which she was born with, and then of course she went out she was born on a Virgo full moon, and she went out on a Virgo full moon, and it was it was very intense watching that whole process go down. I have to say, it was very, very intense, and I'm just glad that she's on the other side now. And I've read through a number of your messages, and a lot of them are very positive, in the sense that some of you have had experiences where loved ones have contacted you. I just read one of Nora's uh, texts and messages and about her father, and so that's actually heartwarming for me to know and understand that she's in a much better place. And she had to be, because what she was going through physically towards the end of her life was not great. It was not great, and because she has such a strong will, uh, it's really a double edged sword to have a strong will, right? Her strong will kept her alive in the past. Like she went through at least two or three instances where she was going to die over the past year, and she managed to bounce back. Uh, and the medical staff was kind of incredulous that she would do that. And some of that, I think, had to do with her genetics, and some of that had to do with just the fact that she had this kind of ironclad will that would not allow her to go silently into that good dark night. And I think that it helped her in her life as well. She had to overcome quite a bit of adversity, and she was the oldest of five children. They were in a they grew up in a piss poor household. Uh, I for a fair amount of time, they had to go to an outhouse outside their house, you know, and that's where they took care of business, right? And so it was almost like living in a turn of the century sort of home upbringing, and there just was not a lot of love to be spread in her world, spread around and shared. So it was very difficult, and to get through an environment like that, an upbringing like that, a person has to develop character traits that help them survive, right? And so those character traits, I think, really helped her in her daily life. Like, she was very successful in her work. You know, she would never call herself a feminist, right? But she was the epitome of being a successful woman. You know, she um, when when she retired from the government, she had the equivalent of a job that was held down by men who had gone to college and had engineering degrees. So she had kind of an obscure gig. She was a contract specialist and for the United States Navy, and she again, it was her just fortitude and attention to detail and being able to just take care of business that allowed her to kind of rise to those heights. Which and she was great. She was great at what she did. Um, and in the end, it's that kind of stubborn nature, that fixity of purpose, those character traits that helped her overcome a lot of the obstacles in her life that at the end of her life were challenging, because it was the same kind of force of will, that got her through things that at the end it was like she couldn't use the force of her will to kind of battering ram her way um, back to health. And so that part was the difficult part to watch. And watching somebody who overcame so many things in their life and so many challenges, and even in the past year with with death. I mean, and using that will to kind of overcome it, to finally get to that final impasse and not be able to kind of break through again. That was difficult because she had um, leaned into that most of her life, and it just wasn't there. She couldn't surmount the breaking down of her body. But we had a really good year, and the and I'll never forget driving her across from the states from California to Texas. And she was not well. I mean, she was, had a lot of fluid. We barely got her out of the hospital, and she had some time to recoup and everything, but she was in a very difficult state. And she managed to make that trip. She managed to make the trip, and then there was a time here. It was in July. We took her to the hospital. Her heart rate was around, I don't know, 24 or something. She was going to die, and they said, "Well, do you want to get a pacemaker?" And it was either the pacemaker or hospice. And I asked her, I said, "What do you want to do?" She said, "Well, I want the pacemaker." I said, "Okay, let's go." So she got a pacemaker, and that was a game changer for her. And it helped her heart, tick, and it allowed her to get to the event in October. And she was great at that event. She was stylish. She was all kind of made up, and she just loved everybody. She loved meeting everybody, and I think that was probably the highlight, was her being at the event. So I know I'm about to start tearing up here, but I want to thank everyone for your kind wishes. Um, it means a lot. Um, all one of the so her birthday is on the 15th of March, and she'll be the star of the day on the 15th. And we'll go over her chart. You'll see the traits. You'll see the traits that made her such a formidable force in a lot of ways, right? You'll see those traits, and I'll go through some of that. But for now, we got the Astro Weather, so let's get into it. It feels weird, like I just feel like I dropped out for a few days, and then the world changes. It's this is how fast things are moving. We have Rothschild that dies. By the way, there's a link to 15 Minutes of Flame. It's in the show notes. So if Tom or Michael or Ryan, one of the mods, want to put that in the chat, that'd be appreciated. But yeah, 15 minutes of flame. We'll talk about Rothschild. So in the brief period of time that I've kind of, ducked out here, which means really I just didn't do Sunday Night Astro Live. We had a guy who self-immolated. Wow. And we had Lord Rothschild pass away. I'm going to talk more about that stuff on the other side of the 15 minutes. But here we go. Let's get into the astro weather. All right, so we got this Venus Mars conjunction, which we have been dancing around with, right? And and again, we talked about a little bit about this last week when they come into a closer square with Uranus and that square with Jupiter. Now, remember, Venus Aquarius is, in my estimation, it's cold. It's a cold sign. It can be cold to cool, right? I mean, that's the nature of Aquarius. We think of Aquarius as being an outer, Uranus is an outer planet. So the outer planets tend to be a bit more removed in terms of their expression in a lot of ways. And Aquarius is part of that grouping. And one of the things that Aquarius demonstrates is detachment, and they can be very detached from kind of what's going on, and while everybody else is sort of got their head in their hands and uh, weeping or moping, or Aquarius it would have a very different kind of response. The thing about Aquarius, and I know we're in Pisces season, but we're talking about Venus and Mars here. The thing about Aquarius is that um, the thing about Aquarius is that it is to some degree clinical. It's got this ability to remove itself from the fray and kind of look down. I mean, think of the eagle, which is, I feel, a symbol of Aquarius, and looking down, from this great height, and kind of being able to see everything that's going on at my kind of a macro view from such a high distance. So when we apply that to what's going on with these squares, my sense is that we're dealing with a lot of cruelty, and this has nothing to do with Aquarius. So please, if you're an Aquarian, try not to personalize this. You're not responsible for this, right? You're just not responsible. But what I'm looking at here is cruelty. Mars square Uranus. This is all about the cruelty of efficiency. And you know, I was reading today before I got on the show about how Pennsylvania, the government of Pennsylvania, wants to outlaw anybody growing food except the government. Of course, the Amish have a stronghold in Pennsylvania, and they want to do away with the Amish providing food sources for people that are actually healthy. So, we get into that square territory a bit here, right? Because Taurus is all about land and the earth. And here we have Mars coming in, right? And Mars is scorched earth squaring Uranus. And Venus squaring Uranus is I don't give a fuck. So this is a really, really difficult energy. So if we're looking at it again from external organizations or groups or hierarchies, this is just cold, calculated, top down. We're moving in this direction, and you better jump on board or step off. And if you step off, you're going to be trampled under the wheels of progress, that sort of thing, right? The other rumor that's been floating around is Ukraine joining NATO. Hello. That is another demonstration here. Venus, Mars, squaring Jupiter, squaring Uranus, and Mars, of course, being aggressive. And there's, could there be some kind of, here's the deal. I've been watching a lot of video of Nixon recently, and he did a series of interviews with this guy. It was around 1983 or so 84. Nixon was still very sharp, very, very sharp, and had the ability to comment on. I didn't always agree with a lot of what Nixon said, like historical figure wise, and some of his. But he had some very interesting things to say, and one of the things that was whether you believed in the process or not, right? They had the Paris Peace Accords, and they would run these two little guys from Vietnam over to Paris to meet with Henry Kissinger and talk about what they could do to de-escalate the war and actually end the war. And the two little Vietnamese guys knew they were holding all the cards because they knew that the United States had to save face. And they were like, well, we're not going to really allow you to save face, but we'll meet with you anyway, and we'll hear what you have to say. So it looks like we're participating in a peace accord. We don't even have that today, right? And with this moon in Libra, right, coming in here and trining Venus and Mars, it's like, why isn't there anybody on the globe? Well, I think we know the answer. I'm just asking this rhetorically. Why isn't there anybody in the global stage that's saying, hey, look, you motherfuckers need to sit the fuck down and work this shit out? Because thousands of lives are being lost, which of course is being done on purpose. And it's threatening the stability of the rest of the world. So sit the fuck down and work it out. Just set Zelensky up with I don't know, a couple of ounces of blow, and Putin doesn't do any blow, but it's just sit down, motherfucker. The problem is when he's all hyped up on coke, he just thinks he can do anything. Oh yeah, we can win this fucking war. We're good. We're good. Oh yeah. Oh. But this is a problem. We're not in the business of peace anymore. Peace is considered a weakness. We've got two major areas of conflict: the Middle East and Ukraine. The same group, by the way, is running both of those operations. That's another story. But this is where the Libra moon comes into play, and on a personal level, I like the Libra moon in this position because you have an opt out. If we see this on a personal level, this is conflict du jour. I mean, this is conflict du jour. And with Venus out front, here's what I would say: watch out for being drawn into conflicts by another person, right? So people like to have allies and people like to triangulate. Watch out for triangulation today. Don't allow yourself to be caught in triangulation. Just say, hey, look, if you want me in this conversation today, here's my position. My position is I am not going to take a side. But if you want to resolve this, I'm amenable to helping you resolve it. Because not only do we have this trine with Venus and Mars, we also have a yod going on. And that yod is it's like we got some Saturn action here, right? We got some Jupiter action here. And this happens really right about now, this time of day, maybe wherever you are. Again, it doesn't have to be morning, it can be your evening. But we're going to have the opportunity here to try to balance out our emotional field. That's right around the degree of my moon. That's interesting. And it's kind of essential, right? And I think the one thing about Libra is Libra tries to find win-win, and we do not live in a society that promotes win-win. We live in a society where there's clearly a winner and a loser, and this has nothing to do with, well, it has something to do with competition, but it also has to do with a deal. Like somebody has a deal, they got to feel like, man, I really crushed that person. I really crushed that person. and it feels like there's so much on the table where everybody can get something out of the deal, but that's not how the world operates. But today is one of those days, right? Today is one of those days where you may find yourself in a position of being the fulcrum of emotional balance if you so choose, right? That's your choice. And there's an opt out here. You don't have to get drawn into this conflict. You just don't. Find your balance, find your peace, find people that you can relate to. And this is one of those days where it would not be unwise to seek counsel, right? Like, if you needed to, especially if it has to do with a legal situation. I'm not a big fan of lawyers, but today would be one of those days where I'd be like, you know what? Let me call up a lawyer. A lot of times a lawyer can sit down and they look, if you're in the world and you have to deal with that sort of shit, the worldly shit, right? Paying a lawyer for some kind of consultation, $150 can be well worth it, right? That's one version of it. The other version of this is just having somebody to sound off and be a sounding board, right? Because we don't want to get caught up in this. This is nasty. This is just nasty energy. Like, this Venus here is recruiting, right? It's recruiting the mob. This is total mob energy right here. So the opt out is over here. And with Saturn and Jupiter, this is the ability to kind of marshal your emotions in a way that are mature, right? Jupiter down here says, believe it or not, there's a reward. You may not see it. You may not understand it immediately, but there is a reward for doing so. We're still dancing with the True Node and Chiron. And Chiron's separated a little bit now. It's at 17 degrees. And we're starting to move in here to a sextile with Venus, and then Mars will eventually catch up to Chiron. That'll be interesting. From a collective or mundane perspective, a lot of special interest, lots of special interest, but special interest isn't necessarily located or have its zip code in things that we think would be special interest, like transgender or minority rights, or those are the typical special interest groups. In Aquarius, it kind of flips, doesn't it? And the special interest groups become something other than that. Because to be honest, if we're just having a really kind of adult conversation here, the special interest groups have become the majority, even though they may be in the minority. The special interest groups have taken the majority position when it comes to things like advertising, diversity, equity and inclusion, ESG scores. They have synthetically manufactured the special interest groups to become the majority. So the majority, which has not been the special interest groups, have been reduced to the minority. Can you see this? This is the alchemy of quote unquote change, the alchemy of quote unquote social progress. So it'll be interesting to watch as we have this Venus Mars conjunction coming in and starting to sextile Chiron and Aries. I'm going to tell you right now, there are a number of people in the world who are sick and fucking tired of Letitia Jameses and the Fannie Willises and these kind of middle managers who are enforcing lawfare on the rest of the world. The temperature for that is starting to escalate into a very hot zone, to the point where people start to set themselves on fire, right? Even though that guy has a different orientation, it feels very symbolic in a lot of ways. And even the conjunction with the true node in Chiron and Aries just feels like self-immolation. So this is this, here we're going to have people, and this could be positive, right? This could be positive, and I am seeing some positivity, to be honest with you. I'm seeing that there are people who theoretically might be a member of the so-called special interest groups starting to rise up and have a voice against it. They're starting to understand that their participation in that kind of social management is not serving anyone. So this is a very interesting time when it comes to that on a collective level. So keep your eye on that as well. We had some communication issues, didn't we? We had the phones go out on Friday. Where's Mercury? So right there, we got Mercury in Pisces right behind the sun. Here we go, stellium in Pisces. And coming in sextiling Jupiter and sextiling Uranus. I really like this stellium action here with Saturn, Moon, Mercury, and Saturn, Sun. Saturn, Sun, and Mercury. I like this stellium a lot because it advances this notion of this idea of spirituality. When I think of Pisces, I think of the essence, right? I think of the essence, and I think that as a sign, Pisces demonstrates a type of unconditionality that other signs really don't have. And I've seen this as a result of being around some very key Pisces people in my life. So this unconditionality has a place to go, right? Or this essence or this spirit has a place to go. And I'm going to say this, right? That whether or not you're rewarded immediately doesn't matter. But to me, this sextile is a reward for your kindness and your compassion and your unconditionality. There's a reward here, but you can't seek the reward, right? That's the whole paradox, isn't it? That, especially with Saturn here, it's sort of like dutiful. Well, this is just what you do, right? But there is a reward here, and it is a an interesting contrast to what's going on here, like with Venus and Mars and even Pluto to some extent, right? We get the Sturm und Drang of this really intense, socially charged kind of protest energy, right? And we demand change, and we demand it now, and it's top down, and it's for the better, it's for the greater. This is just harsh. This is not harsh. So there's two sort of paths that you can take here, right? You can jump in with the frenzy of the mob, or you can lean into what I would call a hard won unconditionality. You see, Saturn, of course, Neptune is kind of the ambassador here, but Saturn, based on this position and the conjunction with the sun, doesn't make it like airy fairy, right? Like you have to work through the limitations of Saturn. So when you get to that point, you've gotten there because you've had to deal with whatever kinds of bounds Saturn has set up. And it's almost like, okay, I understand this. I can be unconditional around this, even though it does make me uncomfortable because I have to take the higher route, right? Or take the high road, right? That's the Sun Saturn. This is about being an adult. This Sun Saturn conjunction, and Mercury is back here. It's that little voice back here telling you, look, be unconditional with this, but do it in a way where you're still retaining some degree of boundary, right? Because that's what Saturn does. Now, as the sun will move past Saturn, we'll have a different discussion about that. It's almost a transcendent moment here right? As the sun and Saturn conjunct, and then the sun moves beyond Saturn. There's something to learn about the old ways and older traditions. This is orthodox energy right here. It's very orthodox. So as the sun moves past that, it's almost, and I know we're not at Easter yet, but it almost feels like Easter, right? Coming across, the Saturnian path. And then we have again the sextile. There's a reward there, but you don't do it for the reward. You don't do it. You do it because you are an adult, right? You stand up and you understand that you have to just unconditionally accept kind of what's going on, um, and work through it. You work through it, and you'll get hints of it, right? You'll get hints of it. That's the way life is. I mean, if you really kind of lean into what you're feeling, you'll get hints of where things are going and how they'll unfold. Okay, let's. By the way, um, Nixon had tremendous instincts. That guy had tremendous. When you listen to him talk, he talks about his instincts and how they work for him. All right, this is our True Hemp Science Star of the Day. So let me throw the banner up here. All right, there we go. You guys know the drill. If you spend $100 or more and type in 15MINS, 15MINS, you will get a free goodie bag with your order. And trust me, the free goodie bag is worth it. You will like what comes with your order. Just type in 15MINS, 15MINS, and you will get that free goodie bag. Oh, yes, indeed, you will. $150 or more get you free shipping. And there was always a 30-day money back guarantee. All right. Let's get into our star of the day, our True Hemp Science star of the day. Today's star of the day, True Hemp Star, is David Sarnoff. Now, I'm not dealing with an A-rated chart, but I made the exception. I try to get go no lower than a B-rated chart. Now, it came down to Sarnoff or Ralph Nader. And I chose Sarnoff because this guy, how do I describe David Sarnoff? He was an intellectual property pirate. And so he's born in Minsk, right, which eventually becomes Russia, but at that time I think it was Belarus, which is Belarus now. It was Russia. So he's born in Minsk, comes to the United States not long after he's born. So he's born in what was that 18 God, I can't even see. 1891. So he's a turn of the century guy, right? He comes to the United States and is educated in a yeshiva school, and becomes very interested in things like telegraphy, which was basically the way people communicated during that time. And you can see with his Mercury and Aquarius that he is kind of dialed into future communication. And Sarnoff would eventually become known as the father of television. But it's not without controversy. And my feeling is that there were a group of people, and I want to do a show on this at some point, but I really need to do some really deep diving. That there were a group of people, after the turn of the century, that were patent pirates, meaning that they were stealing other people's intellectual properties and ideas and appropriating them and Sarnoff is clearly one of them. Now, what happens with Sarnoff is that he's involved in things like radio, right? Radio telegraphy, and he winds up becoming the head of RCA. And he's got the mind for it, right? He's got Mercury in Aquarius. He's got this Jupiter in Aquarius, and we've got these trines going on, with Uranus, with the moon. So he's kind of ahead of the time, right? He's a guy that's moved by visions of the future, and that much is clear. But he's also kind of there around the same time as Edward Bernays, whom of course he rubbed shoulders with, Albert Einstein. So and of course from Austria, Bernays's uncle Sigmund Freud. So we have a group of people that are beginning to influence the masses. And Sarnoff becomes one of the most influential people when it comes to influencing the masses due to his involvement with the creation of television. And you can see all the intellectuality there, right? Like he's kind of wired, and he's actually involved. Here, let me just break down very quickly how television comes into being. There's a guy by the name of Philo T. Farnsworth. And Philo T. Farnsworth had over 300 patents. And when you look at his patents, a lot of these patents, if you look at his background and these patents, some of these patents are like fucking crazy. Like he had a patent for a small thermonuclear generator. Now, who comes up with the idea for a patent like that around the turn of the century? The 1900s. Especially because he comes out of what John Levi would call horse and buggy world. He's a Mormon, but Farnsworth is the guy who is able to take a radio tube and then use this radio tube to create an image. And he's way ahead of everybody else. Way ahead of everybody else. And the first image that was recreated through the radio tube technology was an image of Farnsworth's wife. Now, Sarnoff gets involved with this because there's a Russian scientist that he hires whose name I always butcher. Let me just see if I can figure out his name here. Let me see. Sarnoff, by the way, is also involved in the Titanic in a really weird way. Really, really weird way. Vladimir Zworykin. So he hires this guy, Vladimir Zworykin, to essentially figure out, because Zworykin is at this public display of Farnsworth's ability to recreate an image on a screen, which nobody had done before. And Zworykin says, well, I can do this. And they managed to somehow get pieces of Farnsworth's invention. And Sarnoff convinces RCA and the government, and I think at that time they're connected to General Electric and I forget the other company. But he convinces them to invest in this idea. And he says, I think we could do it for $100,000. 10 years and $50 million later, they finally figure out how to do it. That's how far ahead Farnsworth was. So what happens? Well, Sarnoff and the Russian professor basically steal the idea. So where do we see the theft? It's up here, right? True Node, Pluto, Neptune, right up here, Gemini, communication, squaring Jupiter, squaring the sun, squaring Saturn. He will do anything in order to get ahead, right? To me, this is coming right into intellectual theft, intellectual property theft, right here, right? And the Jupiter Pluto square is by any means necessary. So he winds up eventually losing to Farnsworth in court. And the court demands that RCA and David Sarnoff pay Farnsworth $1 million. Now, that's a lot of money during that time. And David Sarnoff and RCA never pay that amount of money. So they basically wind up stealing his technology. And he's got Mars in Aries, right? So he's a bit of a pioneer. And he's got this sextile going on with Mercury. So there's a lot of really advanced elements in his chart. But there are also elements. He's got this Grand Cross that make him, I think, a very unsavory character. And especially with the True Node and Pluto and Neptune all in Gemini. Again, this is about communication, right? Gemini's communication. Third house, Aquarius is the airwaves. And he, by any means necessary. Yeah, the thing with the Titanic was part of his mythology. You know, he claims that he was on the telegraph with the Titanic for 3 days until it sunk. That was one of his claims to fame. He's a fucking liar. He wasn't even there, right? So this is, again, you know, this hyperbole, this Jupiter-Neptune square, Jupiter-Pluto square. I think he's a really unsavory character, you know, but this is how the world was evolving during that time. And I think even with somebody like Farnsworth, I think he's dealing with these leftover technologies that they're kind of stumbling upon and figuring out kind of how to use, right? I mean, that's my take on it. That's my take. Now, you know, maybe Farnsworth was just way ahead of the curve and was able to come up with this stuff, but I don't know. It's pretty advanced for that time. And it took these guys 10 years, an entire decade. And was it like $50 million, which that during that time was a lot of money in order to recreate the technology. What's interesting is that the first transmission of television comes from the 1939 World's Fair with FDR. And that was the World's Fair that was created by Edward Bernays. So here you have Sarnoff and Bernays sort of teaming up, right? These two guys that are going to craft the medium and the message of the 20th century. You know, Sarnoff is the medium and Bernays is the message through his manipulation and social engineering via marketing, public relations, the manipulation of symbols, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And at that time, there were about 200 TVs in and around New York. And there was one TV station. And they were the first people to witness this ability to tune in and see Roosevelt inaugurate the World's Fair, which was done in a lot of ways as a propaganda tool by Bernays, because Bernays did not like Roosevelt. They didn't like each other. That's a whole different discussion. So a lot of the people that shaped the 20th century are not from this country, obviously, right? Sarnoff, Bernays. You can throw Ayn Rand into that mix, right? She's got her own version of shaping the 20th century. and of course, through Freud, his daughter, Emma Freud, who sets up Freudian psychology all across the country. It's a very interesting topic of conversation. But Sarnoff clearly understood the importance of this technology in kind of a Promethean sort of way, steals fire from the gods, right? He steals it from Philo T. Farnsworth and never, ever compensates him. And, this chart, even though it's not an A chart, Mars really kind of plays that Promethean role, doesn't it? In the ninth house in Aries, right? Stealing fire from the gods. And life goes on just swimmingly for David Sarnoff. Eventually attains the role of brigadier general because of his ability to help the American Army communicate during World War II and deploy a lot of the technology that these guys were working on at RCA. So there you go. There's your True Hemp Science star of the day, David Sarnoff. All right. Thanks everybody for being here. I really appreciate you showing up every day, and especially today, and all your kind words and messages in chat. I wish I could respond to each and every one of them. And I have been on Twitter. So as a group, thank you so much for all of your heartfelt wishes and prayers, and it's just kind of overwhelming actually. So come join me over on 15 Minutes of Flame, and that'll be happening at 9/11. Link in the show notes, and we'll roll up our sleeves and get down into the grime and the gritty. All right, take good care. Bye for now.